I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Velocities in Music, the best kept secret in music reviews. Now, today, we're concluding our tour of, big albums that may or may not be, you may or may not have heard of throughout the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s, the late 90s.
Now we've jumped
now
to 2006,
and the
right?
reason why we're jumping to 2006 is because we've just been I was really into this album. Tom, I know you like this album a lot, so we just had to review it. It was just on our minds. So, like Georgia, we just had to do it. Brand New's "The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me." Now, if you like Brand New, this album and what we think of it probably won't be much of a surprise to you. However, if you're not a big fan of Brand New, I'm hoping that you guys go into this with an open mind, because the thing about Brand New that you got to keep in mind is they were labeled early on in their career as being part of that post-hardcore emo scene that was so popular at the beginning of the 2000s. As Brand New matured and came out with Deja and Tendu in 2003, their second album, they still kept that emo kind of post-hardcore side of things, but their music had a maturity to it. They were using song structures and different songwriting styles on their album that none of their peers were. It was cementing them a reputation with artists that were pretty big in that industry.
Yeah, which for being lumped in the beginning with like Taking Back Sunday and Fall Out Boy, they branched off so significantly. I remember when Devil and God Are Raging Inside of Me came out, because you and I were both fans of Deja and Tendu. We saw that while it wasn't perfectly mature yet, it was a sound that they were going somewhere different with it. I mean, there was still some of that emo quality, still some of that immaturity, but we could tell that there was potential there. And then when this came out, I was like, wow.
Yeah. This album is dark.
Yeah.
It is dark. It's exceptionally emotional in the instrumentation and Jesse Lacey's vocals, which are at times he's just shrieking in desperation, and then other times he's just belting it out, singing. He's always manic with his lyrics.
Yeah.
I mean, his lyrics are just are dark, and oftentimes kind of bitter towards whether it be religion or a girl or whatever he's dealing with at the time. It comes out in his music. But one of the things that I absolutely love about this band is they approach each album differently. And with this album, they really were going for a big, thick rock sound that really doesn't have a lot of the post-hardcore of that early, punk revival, the new wave punk crap that was out in the early 2000s. It really doesn't have a lot of that on there. It's just really expansive tracks that sometimes have choruses and verses and sometimes play with their song structure a little bit. One of my favorite things about this album, Tom, is the giant section in the middle of just really dark tracks that have these crazy bridges where they really experiment with dynamics and then different structures where they'll have like really loud parts at the end, or like all of a sudden at the end of Luca where it just explodes, gets extremely quiet to where you barely hear it even if you have the volume all the way turned up, and then it just explodes.
And this is one of those albums that's on like downward spiral level in terms of the flow balancing out with individual track highlights, because this album, it almost plays like a story, it almost plays like a rock opera, and yet if you just pulled out any one song and listened to it, you would be blown away by it. I mean, there are a couple interlude tracks like Welcome to Bangkok and the Untitled One, which I still think play a very good role in the album.
And they transition the song.
Exactly. But I mean, so that balance is just perfect on this record. And I can see it being maybe a little hard for people to get into, simply because if you don't feel this one, if you can't get behind the very desperate and maybe at times emo, if we want it, I mean, like you said, that word has a lot of baggage, but if you can't get behind that vocal presentation, then you're probably not going to like this album. And that's understandable, but I think it just takes going into it with an attitude that it's something different, that it's something that means a lot more, that has a lot more depth than what you would normally think of.
And see, so many of us, if you're watching music reviews now, you're probably listening to music that's coming out nowadays. So much of that music was influenced by the grunge scene, by Nirvana. And Nirvana, they made a name for themselves by making music that was based on emotion, yet it wasn't called emo. I put this in kind of the same category.
I think that's a really good way to put it.
Yeah, there's a ton of emotion here in desperation, in the vocals and instrumentation, yet that's part of what the music music is. It's making a statement of expression based on emotion rather than being about to procure emotion from you. So, I mean, if you experience emotional responses from this album, it's because you're participating with the emotion.
Well, and the lyrics play a big part in that too.
Yeah.
I mean, and you compare this to like Taking Back Sunday with there's the line that Ian always brings up, like, with my one last dying breath, I'd apologize for bleeding on your shirt and stuff like that you know. It almost gets to a point where it sounds whiny and cheesy, and I think that the reason this album works is because it doesn't do that.
Ever.
And yeah, exactly. And while there is some internal conflict behind the narrator and Jesse Lacey's vocals, there's still, he talks about a lot of external themes, a lot of existential type things, religion, you know, relationships, stuff like that. But it's not that high school boyfriend-girlfriend relationship type drivel, you know?
Right.
There's a lot more depth to it. There's a lot more philosophy behind it. It makes me think. And if it can make me think and feel, then that's what I'm looking for.
Right.
You know?
You mentioned earlier that it might be a difficult album to get into, and I find that when I'm into this album, when I like want to listen to this, it's all I want to listen to, and it's very difficult to find other albums to substitute it. However, I find that when I'm not listening to it, it's tough to just put on because it's so heavy.
Yeah.
There's so much going on. It's so dark and depressing at times and desperate. I mean, that aggressiveness though is really what I admire so much about this album. And the more I listen to it, the more I like it. I've listened to it for years now, and it's my favorite brand new album. And I you know, hopefully, you know, I hear that they're working on new material. You know, we had Daisy in 2009, and hopefully we come out with something. You know, they come out with something that, you know, can rival this. But
yeah.
I mean, that is a tall order. This is a tough album to beat. Personally, I'm going 100. I love this record.
I'm also going to go 100.
There you go.
One of my
and
favorites.
Very much influenced by Sunny Day Real
Estate. Yes.
Absolutely. What do you guys think about The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me? A favorite brand new album, the whole emo genre. Let us know what your thoughts are. What are some other notable albums you'd like to see us review? Your feedback is awesome, and we always appreciate your participation. Leave us a comment at www.velocitiesofmusic.com or youtube.com/velocitiesofmusic. As always, follow us on Twitter, like us on Facebook. That's where we do our talking with you guys. Thank you for watching. I'm Jake.
I'm Tom.
And we are VIMTV, Moving Music Critique Forward.